do my chiming sound again, but no one seemed to like it. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to reintroduce to you again Nancy Fund. Nancy, as you may know from the bios in your book, is the founder and managing partner of DBL Investors, Double Bottom Line, a venture capital firm in San Francisco that's really done some amazing things. Nancy happens to, as you know, been on the ground floor over at Tesla and BrightSource, and as well as SolarCity, the company that I work with. Since Elon is nowhere to be found today, Nancy, I'm going to tell you that you're my favorite board member by far. You got, remember, no one told you, you got to take care of your board members, okay? Take care of the board members. So I want to introduce to you again Nancy Fund. Nancy, take it away, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Seth. SolarCity is one of my favorite companies, too. All right, so we are talking about entrepreneurship and innovation business models right now. We have a fantastic trio of women to tell their stories as a way to get into this topic. It's critically important. And certainly the first panel this morning gave a great framework in terms of the scope of the problem, how to use technology and innovation and policy to start developing solutions. And now we're going to drill down a little bit more and be a little bit more micro-focused and what does it mean in the day-to-day life and career of women to really have a role in reshaping the clean energy economy. So the format, we're going to have Vanessa Green, Emily Kirsch, and Charlotte Kim take 5 minutes or so to tell you a little bit about themselves and their story. And then we'll have a discussion just among the four of us, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So we're going to start with Vanessa Green, who is the co-founder and CEO of FINSix, which is a, I'll let Vanessa tell you what it is. Before founding FINSix, Vanessa was a business development manager at TCOM Investments in Dubai, where she led business development strategy. And she's worked sustainable real estate and investment vehicles. She worked for the Monitor Group for a few years and is a board member of Community Water Solutions, which is a nonprofit that she founded in 2008. She's won the very prestigious Patrick E. McGovern Entrepreneurship Award and was selected by the Boston Business Journal Innovation All-Stars Rising Star Committee to be one of those, and also Forbes 30 Under 30 in energy. So we're very delighted to have Vanessa here, and Vanessa got her advanced degrees right here at MIT, so I'm sure she's glad to be here as well. So welcome, Vanessa.
Do you want me to use the podium? Whatever you prefer. Right. So hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa. Many of you I know because, as Nancy said, I started FINSix right here out of MIT. To give you a little bit of background, I came to MIT first as an environmental engineer back in 2007. At that time, I had no conception for what was entrepreneurship or even that people like me could have the opportunity to start their own company. I was immersed in the ecosystem here at the Institute. I'm very fortunate to have a number of wonderful professors and people in the community take me through the steps that you need to think about for building a company. I was involved in a number of different ventures over the course of my time here and got better and better at thinking about how do you take a new technology idea and get it to the point, what are those milestones that you need to hit to reach a market and then get something funded and grow from there. So ultimately, this is now several years and a bunch of practice later. I met a team from the power electronics program here at MIT that had developed a new technology for very high frequency power conversion. So what that is, basically the best example is everyone here has a laptop. You think about the brick on the laptop power cord. Now it's about 30 to 50% of the weight and size of your laptop. It's fundamentally limited by switching speeds in power electronics. So what we can do is we can switch 100 to 1,000 times faster, which means we can make the power supply 10x smaller. So for you, that means a laptop brick the size of, say, an iPhone charger, and then you can charge multiple devices off that one thing. But for us, that piece of power electronics is applicable across basically any electronic product. So where this ties in kind of closely to the clean energy space is in LED lighting. So inside LED lamps, you require a little power converter. And one of the big challenges in that space is that the power converters are big and too hot and make it very difficult to solve the kind of energy, heat, light balance of an LED lamp. So with our technology, you can help enable LED lighting, which is one of the kind of primary markets that we're targeting. So we got the company going back in 2010. We started working on it. Went through the summer. I did my internship. I was a business school student at the time. My internship was putting together my business plan. And then we fundraised that fall, and we're fortunate enough to get a kind of solid group of investors to invest in us and help us develop the technology into a first product. So now we've reached that point. We have little AC-DC converters. I have some in my bag that are basically the size of a little bigger than an iPhone charger and can do 50 watts. We're working with a lot of OEMs in different sectors to take those to market next year. And it's a pretty exciting time for me and the company. So I'm looking forward to discussion. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Vanessa. Now I'd like to introduce Emily Kirsch, who comes from California and runs something called Sfun Cube. Is that how you say it? Yeah. Sfun Cube. It is fun. So Emily is a co-founder and CEO of Sfun Cube, which is in Oakland. And really, it's an incubator and accelerator model for solar startups. It attracts the next generation. I mean, the Bay Area is already a leader in solar companies, but it's really what Emily and her team are doing is attracting the next generation of players to continue that vibrant leadership. Prior to starting this Sfun Cube, Emily worked with Van Jones, the legendary Van Jones, at the Ella Baker Center, and worked on something called the Oakland Green Jobs Corp and Oakland Solar Mosaic and the Climate Action Coalition. So she's been right at the core of green jobs and economic development as it relates to clean energy. Emily is a writer. She's written various manuals and pieces, including Making Green Work, Creating Climate Action in Your Community, and such, and really it lends her talents to Workforce Collaborative, the Workforce Collaborative in Oakland, and other related activities. In her spare time, she rides motorcycles. I'm guessing it's not an electric motorcycle, but maybe for your birthday or something. Raises chickens, and she rows with the Lake Merritt Masters women's crew team, and that's, so you know she's hardcore. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Really happy to be here. Fair warning, I talk really fast, and there's a lot to cover. So excited to talk to you. What's one thing that we all need? We all need energy. There's this universal need for energy, a universal need for electricity, and in our minds, a universal need for solar. And so our mission and purpose at the Sfun Cube is to create solar for universal need, or as we call it, Sfun. So the Sfun Cube is two parts. Part one is an incubator, and part two is an accelerator. And we serve solar startups, so solar entrepreneurs who are mostly in the software, finance, and analytics space, all the spaces that are reducing soft costs. So, and soft costs meaning anything other than the hardware. So most people, when you say solar, they're like panels, inverters. But what we're trying to do is to reduce all of the soft costs, meaning the design, the permitting, the customer acquisition, the things that actually cost the most in terms of residential installation. So the incubator is, we have 12,000 square feet of Class A office space in Jack London Square in Oakland, California, overlooking the San Francisco Bay. There's about 10 companies in the incubator. As long as you're a cool solar startup and you can pay the rent every month and it's sub-market rate rent, then you're in. 10 companies in the accelerator, about 60 people who work out of that office in-house, another 30 that are employed by those companies but based somewhere else around the world. We do monthly events. We've partnered with DOE and Sunshot Initiative, the Clean Tech Open, Young Professionals in Energy. So that's part one, the incubator. Part two, the accelerator is a 9-month program startups have to apply to. If they get in, we give them free rent, so $10,000 to $20,000 worth of rent, $10,000 cash, about $50,000 in business services from law firms, accounting, marketing, design, connecting them to advisors and mentors, and then finally connecting them to capital, be it angel investors, VCs, bank debt. So we do that in exchange for two things. One is 5% equity in the company. The other is a commitment that the company stay in the Bay Area as they continue to grow, because our mission is to make the Bay this hub of innovation and entrepreneurship in the solar industry. So why are we doing this? Two reasons. One, climate change is the greatest crisis our generation, let alone humanity, has ever faced. We think that the solar industry has a great opportunity to address climate emissions and help with climate mitigation, to address greenhouse gas emissions, but then also to create a ton of jobs. So in the United States, there's now more solar employees than coal miners. There are more solar employees in California than actors and actresses, and there's more solar employees in Texas than ranchers. So we're doing good. Oops, oh, I messed it up. Damn. There we are. Oh. Sorry. To go to the next slide. Top, bottom, right, left? Right? Oh, okay. Okay, sorry, I sent some more, but they, I don't think they were uploaded, but that's fine. So we're doing it because of jobs. So again, a ton of jobs in the solar industry. The solar industry is actually creating jobs at a rate 10 times the national average. So we're really excited about that, want to see that continue. We're also seeing this cultural shift in solar. So it used to be that if you said you were in the solar industry about 10 years ago, people were like, all right, hippie, have fun with that. Now you have Warren Buffett putting in billions of dollars into the industry, and people who, whether they care about the environment or the financial opportunity or the ability to save money, that they're getting into solar. So it's a promising direction that the industry is going. So basically, we're focused on the software, the finance, the analytics. To give you a sense of a couple of the companies that are in the incubator and the accelerator, raise your hand if you've heard of a company called Mosaic. Oh my gosh, they'd be so happy. So Mosaic is doing crowdfunding for solar. So they're connecting everyday people like you and me to solar projects that otherwise wouldn't be financed by big banks. So the $1 to $3 million range allows people like us to put in some money, as little as 25 bucks, average investment about $1,000, and to make between a 4.4 and a 6.38% return on our investment. So it's like, who wouldn't want to make money by helping people go solar? They've had over a dozen projects across the country that sell out almost instantaneously. So that's one example. Another is called Hive. Remember from yesterday how many people around the world don't have access to electricity? Yeah, 1.3 billion around the world. So there's a company called Hive that will go into emerging markets where people are using diesel or kerosene, install one centralized solar system, and connect up to 20 rural households to that one solar system. People pay for the energy on a prepaid basis, like prepaid phone cards, but prepaid solar. And they do it through their flip phone. So it's all SMS text-based. They partner with M-Pesa, one of the biggest mobile banking institutions in Africa. And they're being charged less for that solar electricity than what they're paying for diesel or kerosene. They've done about 4 installations in Kenya. They're about to do 40 in the Philippines, growing really fast. It's also cloud-based software. So from our offices in Oakland, they can send a text to their customers in Kenya saying, hey, your account's low. Do you want to add money to your account so that the lights stay on? And then a final example, Sunnable is a company that, imagine, kayak.com or Expedia for airline tickets. Imagine that plus Yelp. They had a solar baby. It'd be called Sunnable. So Sunnable is a place where people can see, compare, and request quotes from local installers. So right now, there's a bunch of solar companies. It's a little complicated to figure out who to go solar with. If you put in your address or your zip code, they'll show you who in your neighborhood has gone solar, which is actually the biggest factor in residential solar. It's not how much money you'll save. It's not the environmental impact. It's did my neighbors do it? And so they'll show you who in your neighborhood has done it, and then they'll show you who they did it with and what their average rating is. So it's a way to generate more customers getting into the solar industry. So our mission and goal is really to support those entrepreneurs. Oftentimes it's 1 or 2 person startups that, grow into the 25 or 30 person startup. Best case scenario, early stage companies join our accelerator. They get the capital they need, the connections that they need to then be stable enough that after the 9 months they can then pay us to be in the incubator. And then they grow so big, like Mosaic is doing, that we have to kick them out, but help them find other office space in the neighborhood we're in Jack London Square, if not Oakland, if not the broader Bay Area. So if you are a solo entrepreneur, if you know solo entrepreneurs who need office space, who you think would be a good fit for the accelerator, send them our way and we will have some fun. To show you just a couple of the photos, this is we host a solar hackathon once a year. We just had it last weekend. Jennifer Granholm, the former governor of Michigan, was there playing with lots of cash that we ended up giving to the winners of the hackathon. Brandon Hurlbut, former deputy director of the U.S. Department of Energy. We had fun with that, and then that's just a typical day at the Sfun Cube. So if you want to have some fun, then come join us in Oakland, and I'd be happy to host any of you anytime you're in the Bay. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you, Emily. Now we're going to hear from Charlotte Kim. Charlotte is a partner in the New York office of Wilson Sonsini, and so has a very accomplished legal career that spans, reading her bio in terms of the kinds of transactions and clients she's had, it's robust. She does specialize in energy as well as healthcare, medical device, and other life science, as well as retail and some tech. She's structured, negotiated, and closed more than 150 transactions with a total value over $20 billion. And when it comes to actually taking a concept from an idea, at the Sfun Cube to something that is living, breathing, and thriving, lawyers can play critical roles in helping you structure and prevent making a lot of mistakes that you'll regret down the road, speaking from personal experience. So welcome, Charlotte, and we're looking forward to hearing your perspective.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nancy. I'm probably going to be the most boring of all these panelists on this particular panel, because I'm dealing with talking mostly focusing on the most boring of topics, but one of the most important, money and financing and capital. So there's been a lot of talk about different partners and partnerships in the different phases, et cetera. So I just wanted to share with you this one picture, this one diagram, which is one path possible that a lot of clean energy companies end up following, and is sort of the ideal path in many ways, with showing the difference at the top level is what I call the holdco level. It's sort of the holding company level and the types of financing that can be used at the different stages. This is really assuming more a hard technology company rather than a soft technology company. At the bottom level are what I would call more a project company level, where you're actually, for example, you have some technology that you're proving out, and you need to actually build a pilot plant to demonstrate the technology, to prove it, and then as it scales up to commercialize. So at each one of these different levels, there's a valley. That's a valley that needs to be overcome. And there, in addition to the technological aspects of it, as you scale up toward commercializing, there's a financing valley that needs to be overcome. And there are different ways to combine the different sources of capital at different stages, because not all sources of capital, as we've heard from many speakers, will take all kinds of risk. So I wanted to just share this a little bit. I think it helps encapsulate what a lot of people have been talking about and put it all into one picture. I work a lot with many different entrepreneurs and companies and many projects and many stakeholders in those technologies and projects. And at every stage, there is a different risk profile and a different return profile. And so you'll be going and talking to different kinds of investors who are looking for different risks and different returns. And so I think it's important to keep this life cycle in mind. When you're at the beginning, they always say, that you should also keep in mind how you're going to exit. And the types of financing that you take on throughout this process also shape very much the types of exit options that you may have later on. And so that's also very important to keep in mind as you're going through this process. And it is very much herding cats at a lot of times. And it can be very challenging, but it also is one of the most rewarding things that I think that people can do. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, all three of you. We've got sort of the two entrepreneurs, and then you've got Charlotte and me that are sort of cheerleaders on the sideline. So I'm going to sort of cut through some of this, the presentation, and let's get to some real specifics that maybe aren't quite as wonderful as you guys make it seem. And of course, entrepreneurs are by definition and by DNA optimistic, and so we're thrilled and happy to see that you guys are having so much fun. But tell us something that's going wrong or something that keeps you up at night. What do you worry about? Emily?
Ooh. Well, I was up for 36 hours straight for the solar hackathon, so that definitely kept me up at night. But that was actually really fun. I believe that the solar entrepreneurs are out there. You know, the solar entrepreneurs that are working out of cafes and working out of their garages and working out of their homes, and you know, they'll come to us and say, "I didn't know you were here, and I'm so happy to be here." But you know, like I said, we have about a dozen in-house now between the incubator and accelerator, and I wonder, and sometimes I keep myself up at night thinking, you know, are they out there, and are we going to be able to find them and support them? And we're relatively new. We incorporated in January of this year. Been working on it for about a year, and so yeah, I wonder if they're really out there, and if not, how do we cultivate them, and how do we convince, you know, 20 of you to start solar companies and do it with us? So that's what I think about.
And Vanessa?
So one thing that I think a lot about, and the thinking about it evolves over time too as my business grows, is finding the right kind of capital to grow my business. So in our case, we're a hardware company. We build stuff, in fact, some semiconductor chips, which takes money. And at each stage, like Nancy was saying, there's a certain set of risks and investors that may have appetite for those risks. One of the things that I think is really positive is that there's a lot of new types of capital coming into the sector, in the clean energy sector. Everything from family offices, you have strategics, there's money coming in from international investors that are looking to kind of pull innovation into their geographies. A lot of different sources we can consider. But as we think about that, every source of capital comes with certain strings attached. And what we need to do is build a business that has one vision and have investors around that business that are aligned with kind of with our vision and the vision of the broader team then for the company. And I think, you know, I think a lot about, hey, you know, we could get money from over here, but what does that money look like, and how is that going to potentially limit our options down the road? We can talk more specifically about some of the examples there, but I think holistically, that's something I worry a lot about as a founder and CEO.
Well, and that is a good point to drill down on a little bit, because everyone is always kind of euphoric about the role of strategics coming into this business, and to be sure they can play a huge role. Daimler, for example, played a huge role in Tesla's growth. At the same time, I mean, you're enabling LEDs. I mean, if you get money from Cree, you know, you're going to alienate Philips, or I mean, there's just you're kind of limiting your destiny with those decisions. So how do you navigate around that? And maybe Charlotte, you've seen this, and what are some of the tips you might have? Yeah.
No, those are definitely very important considerations in the model, and I think ultimately a lot of it depends on where your ultimate market is and where you're planning on really sort of focusing commercial stage distribution, et cetera. And I think, you know, it depends on the particular slice of the market. The thing that tends to keep me up at night is I think the venture capitalists play a very important role in this ecosystem that is not quite, there's no complete substitute for them. I mean, that there are definitely more angel investors, family offices, strategics. We've seen strategics come in earlier, investing earlier in the process than before. but they're not substitutes for each other. And there's a very important role that venture capital money plays. And because that's lately, in the last 2-3 years, has been sort of falling a little bit out of favor, I worry about that, because I don't see there being, I think that's not a positive thing for not just the clean energy field, but generally for innovative technologies generally.
So we work with a VC firm, and I think I would agree that particularly for hardware companies, they play an important role in terms of taking risk at a time when other folks might be reluctant to do so. And one of the specific challenges I've seen around that, and you hear a lot of people talk about it, but like within the VC fund that we are a part of, that fund is invested in a lot of other sectors that maybe require less capital to get to their next milestone. And I think it it puts a lot of pressure on the specific individual VCs within that partnership that invest in us to continue to make a case for, why this sector is going to create value within the portfolio when, we're competing against in the portfolio businesses that, purely count eyeballs, and, we make stuff and then have to sell it, and there's COGS associated with that. So it's very different economics. And so I think there is an entrenched challenge there, and I think that VCs are thinking that through and thinking about how to structure things so that they can be a fit for this sector if they're committing to continue to stick with it.
Yeah, I think there has been a flight away from the super capital intensive clean tech companies, although you can make the opposite argument that the really significant companies of our day are capital intensive, and Tesla's a great example of a insatiable appetite for capital. So it is a balancing act, and that's why people go to strategics, because they have deep pockets and they understand this. And I noticed, Emily, that you focus on kind of capital light companies. Is there a role for higher capital companies in your incubator?
So we definitely don't focus as much on the hardware side. When our entrepreneurs move in, they're like, here's my laptop and I'm done. So it's definitely pretty easy for them to get set up. And I think in part it was because of that flight away from some of the more capital intensive, the more hardware plays that, this need for the software and for addressing the soft costs has emerged. So in our space, we did have someone that was a bit more hardware focused, and we helped him find space in Alameda because he was soldering, and we were like, that's a fire hazard. You can't do that in our office. So, so we do try to establish partnerships because I think being in close contact with the technology development is important. But you could have the greatest technology in the world. Someone said this earlier. But if it sits in a closet, that does nobody any good. And so the role of our entrepreneurs is to make sure that these products and technologies can get into the market as soon as possible.
I was just wondering, you take an equity stake, which I'm hoping you have some kind of anti-dilution protection in that because you're going in so early. And for a company like Mosaic, that may be worth a lot someday, but it's worth basically nothing now. So how do you keep the lights on? I mean, what's your business model?
Yeah, so we do get rent from the entrepreneurs that are in the incubator. So they do pay us, even though it's sub-market rate, they do pay us to be there. We also get corporate sponsors to fund the incubator. They say they like the PR, which I'm sure they do, but I think they also like to see what's happening because they may want to acquire some of the technologies that are coming out of this Sfun Cube. And like you said, get them early when the valuation is still low. On the incubator side, we're funded by angel investors who, because we own 5% in each of the companies, they therefore do as well. So it's sort of like a portfolio. They diversify their risk across all the companies in the accelerator. If one of them does well, they have a piece of that. We're also really relationship-based, so a lot of more so accelerators and incubators, they're very intensive, hands-on, 3 months straight. You live there, you eat there, you sleep there, you work there, and then you have a demo day and you have 60 seconds to pitch your idea to this amazing group of VCs and angels, and if you flop, that's it. And we know that that's not the real world. The real world is based on relationships that are built over time, and so we try to cultivate those relationships in this Sfun Cube. So if an angel investor who's invested in us really likes a particular company, we definitely facilitate the relationship to help make an add-on investment and don't take a cut. We just want them to get money and be happy.
And what about there's a term in our industry that's kind of a euphemism. It's called a pivot. I don't know. Do people know what that means? It's basically when you mess up, but you've got venture capitalist money, and so you don't want to say you mess up. So you revise what you're doing, and you come up with Plan B, and that's your pivot. Have you gone through a pivot? Tell us about that.
So we've actually gone through a couple. One of I would say the most significant one and the most recent one, I'll talk a little bit about that. Initially, we thought our first product was going to be an LED lighting solution. We were passionate about enabling that space and had a technology that was pretty close to what you need for a low voltage light bulb. So for a low voltage light bulb, it's more DC-DC, and that was pretty close to what had been done in the lab. So we said, okay, like this is good. This is going to be our first product. It's going to go in this light bulb. We worked on it for a period of time, and as often happens, it ends up being about twice as slow and twice as expensive as you initially anticipate. And further, over that twice as slow and twice as expensive, the margins in that particular lamp type started getting really tight. So it got to be the point, this is kind of around the early part of this year, where we still had, another 9, 12 months before we could have a commercial product out there. And it was pretty clear that at the time we intersected that market, the margins were going to be such that we couldn't make money anymore in that particular product. So, we had venture capital, and we thought, now what are we going to do? We could keep going. We could basically spend the rest of the money we have delivering this product for this market. Does that make sense? And what are our other options? And so for us, like I talked about early on, we're fundamentally a power electronics company, and the early work that we had done gave us a foundation for very quickly stepping into AC/DC. So AC/DC power is a much bigger market, and no one was really doing what we were doing in that space. So we looked at, okay, let's think about what that might look like. What's the engineering requirements to get from where we are now to that market, and came up with, again, about 9 months to a year. But at this point, we're looking at, instead of probably a $4 or $5 million total market in that electronics for that specific lamp, you're looking at a $30 billion market across a number of different sectors in sub 300 watt AC/DC power electronics. So you invest the same amount of time, and you have a much larger market that you can tackle at that point. And we had gotten the technology to the point where we could see a really clear roadmap to do it. So we went to our board and said, these are the two things. This was our original plan. We were going to start first in LED lighting, which was closer to the technology. But now looking at what's still required to invest to get to that commercial product, and what we could do on the other side, which is where ultimately our big end market is, our recommendation is that we make a shift and we focus on the AC/DC space. And further, the best first market in that is the little laptop adapter. So we're recommending that we do that first. So we made that shift about 6 months ago now. It's been really, I think, successful in that we have some of our first partnerships coming together in that space based on demonstration products on the AC/DC side. So it was a successful pivot, but I'm sure not what the investors anticipated when they invested in us.
Well, it's okay. We're used to that. So for Charlotte and Emily, interested in your perspectives on the entrepreneur, the management team in say, solar companies. Solar companies would be toast without supportive policies, without the investment tax credit, without net metering and such. And so what do you see as in terms of your management teams? Do they have to play a role in going to Sacramento or to Washington, or is that something you think do you do that for them? I mean, I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't grow up thinking they're going to be schlepping to the state capitol to get their policies, especially if they come from the tech sector. So what's your view on the role, and is that part of being a good CEO in this sector, is that you know how to do that?
I think absolutely. I think if you are in the energy sector, it's a highly, highly regulated sector. And even you look at Solar City, for example, I mean, there's a lot of consumer regulations because they get into consumer finance. And so definitely, especially as the business grows and scales up, becomes more complicated, starts getting into other areas, we definitely see then a successful company as it grows, adding to its team the various specific knowledge, skills, and experience that maybe they didn't need when you first start out. But certainly policy experts, on the finance side, we're seeing securitization experts as people look more closely at solar securitization, or just people familiar with public capital markets, people familiar with more, you see the CFO team being built out with more sophisticated, more complex financial expertise, and definitely regulatory experts, almost lobbying type experts, you definitely need to build out your team as this develops, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I worked with Mosaic on their first 4 installations in Oakland as part of their pilot, and that was over 2 years ago, and it took them 2 years to get approval from the Securities and Exchange Commission to offer these investments to people like us. And so that was actually, they were just, everyone's like, where are your projects? And they're like, we're just waiting on, waiting on the approval. So, so I think that work is essential for these new business models to exist. And at the Sfun Cube, we've been really lucky to have the California Center for Sustainable Energy as one of the tenants in the incubator. They administer all of the rebate programs, so all of the incentives, all of the rebates. So they've become our in-house policy experts, so that when our solar entrepreneurs, because you're right, like they don't have time. They're trying to run their business. It's really hard for them to be, going to Sacramento or to DC to speak on their own behalf. But CCSE has been the place where they can go to say, hey, here's what I need. Here's what's holding me back. Can you communicate this to, the CPUC or other decision makers? And it's benefited it's benefited CCSE because then they can say, we have the voices of all these entrepreneurs behind us who are saying this is what they need in order to continue to create jobs. So it's been this interesting win-win to have them in-house.
And what about in an incubator, accelerator environment, and that picture you showed of 3 dozen happy smiling faces? A lot of innovation requires, we call it stealth mode, protecting your secrets, patent applications, and such. And in certain environments, there's a huge premium placed on being low key, below the radar, not talking about what you're doing, and that. Those photos you show, it looks like a really fun place. But how do you make sure that the community doesn't undermine some of the competitive advantage?
Yeah. There's this interesting dynamic in the Bay Area. It's incredibly collaborative, and so even though there's a range in this Sfun Cube. Some people are very much like, you want to see my financial, sure, and then there are other people who hold their cards closer to their chest, and we don't require any level of sharing or not disclosing. We do though encourage and support people who believe in that culture of collaboration that we've seen so many benefits come from. Entrepreneurs working with one another, and some of them end up contracting with each other. And so I think that's just the nature of the Bay, and it's very much the nature of this Sfun Cube. We've had people who want to join the incubator or the accelerator who say, I'm all about what you guys are doing, but I'm really not interested in sharing or collaboration. And we tell them, it's probably not the best place for you, just because those synergies happen because people share, as much, of course, they don't have to share everything, but as much as they're willing to. That's where we see the benefits of this shared working space. And we support competition as well. If there are companies that are doing something similar, if they're okay with being in the same space, then we welcome it and think that it's healthy and, support it.
Terrific. Well, I want to make sure that we have time for any questions from the audience. Otherwise, I'll continue to ask questions. But do people have issues or questions they'd like to raise with us?
Hi, I have a question. I was told that to make a startup company either successful or stand out, there's 3 components. The first component is you have to have a good product, which you all talked about. Second component is to have a great marketing plan, which you guys touched up on. Third component was you need to have a good lawyer. So I want to hear from your perspective if that's true with your company, and are there other components that you guys have run into that would be good tips for maybe future entrepreneurs?
Well, I think we all agree you have to have a good lawyer, right, Charlie?
I think I'm a bit biased on that one. I'll let you answer.
I think one thing that I would add to that, so we had product, market,
And lawyer.
and lawyer. I think things that I would add to that are team and customers. So customers more specifically than market. It is important that you can show that your technology can address a large market and there's a lot of potential if you grow. But I think more than that, it's important to have specific customers that see value in your product and are going to be your first to fifth buyers. So I would add that. And I think the other piece is team. Everyone, whether it's customers, investors, new recruits, everyone looks at the caliber of the existing team and also how well that team works together and what gaps there are and how aware the team is of the gaps. So as you think about kind of building a successful foundation, I would encourage you to look at who you have in your existing team and think about what skills and experiences you might want to get around the table that aren't currently there.
And there's a saying in our industry that I'd rather have a B product in an A team than an A product in a B team. I mean, obviously you'd rather have both A's, but if you have to have your choice, and that really speaks to the importance of the people in making things happen, irrespective of the dynamics going on in your marketplace. Then you can't ask a question.
Oh, my question was just to roll off of what you said. Can you tell us the difference between an A team and a B team? And especially as, you know, coming at it from looking at whether you're going to invest in that team, what really stands out to you?
Oh, gosh, that's I had to open my big mouth about the A team. It is a little hard to pin it down, but I mean the qualities of a successful entrepreneur have to do with you know, and if you know successful entrepreneurs, they're usually workaholics. They usually have single-minded focus. They cajole. They do anything possible to get other people to work as hard as they do. They have vision. They have optimism, and they have analytical proclivities, although that's somewhat measured because they all take on things that in retrospect they didn't have a really good shot at succeeding at. So it's a very mercurial balance, and I think that the really good entrepreneurs out there know how to listen. So many people that pitch a deal, they just talk, and an hour later, you haven't gotten a word in edgewise, and that's really not an effective learning skill. And so, while you want to dazzle people with your command and your energy, I think the really good entrepreneurs are like sponges. They absorb a lot of lessons and wisdom around them, and they seek it out. So those are just some of the characteristics.
I had a question for Charlotte. I'm right here. You mentioned when you had your financial value chain up there that was more well suited to a technology play and a sort of making a widget or something. And I was just wondering how you would adapt that financing value chain for a softer kind of play or a service play.
Right. That's a great question. For a software, more soft tech oriented place, so for example, big data, I would shorten it significantly. And just that it's simply not that capital intensive. And so simply not that much capital is required, at least in the initial stages. I think strategics could still play an important part in that. When you're dealing with big data, for example, in the energy sector, because it is so regulated, I think the utilities, for example, very important, and understanding the regulated marketplace that you're operating in is very important. For a more financial services-oriented business, an interesting example is to see what has happened in energy efficiency finance, which is not really a new area, but it has definitely seen growth and innovation in the last 2-3 years, at least in the States here, because of largely the successful application of the power purchase agreement model to the energy efficiency model space. So that is very interesting and does not take capital in the sense of needing to develop that model. However, where the capital is needed is still ultimately you have an energy efficiency retrofit project that is being done. And so there is still some initial capital needs there, as with any business model. But basically, it would shorten the chain and it would make it a little bit, maybe or two fewer value.
Hi, I'm Sally Griffith. I work with the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and I work with incubators and accelerators. And we're putting together an RFP to help incubators and accelerators put events out to help clean energy companies. One thing I'd really like to see at these events is more women, whether it's service providers or potential entrepreneurs. So what would you suggest that would help get more women through the doors to these events so they can make the connections they need and even see that it's an option for them to be an entrepreneur?
What I heard a stat recently that the greatest factor in women getting into engineering, just to use as a proxy, is not the classes that are offered. A lot of times people say, oh, well, if the classes aren't there, the girls won't become, want to study this as they grow up. But I heard the biggest factor was actually if they just see women in those roles. And so I think that's why conferences like this are so important, because if we see women who are successful and are making it, in the sector, then, for the young women, we believe we can do that too. And so in terms of, for incubators and accelerators, that's definitely the case with the Sfun Cube. I'm embarrassed to admit that there are no other women founders in the Sfun Cube, besides myself as a co-founder in the Sfun Cube itself. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to do the targeted outreach to groups like this, and if the women's groups on campuses like MIT within the departments that have polled from to get you here, then to create those. But I think it's just a matter of doing really targeted, ideally face-to-face outreach. And I know for the hackathon we were trying to bring together a bunch of developers and designers, and I joined a bunch of meetup groups and LinkedIn groups for data scientists and things that I am not, but just to get access to the people who we wanted. And so I would do the same thing for that, and be happy to talk to you about it more afterwards and brainstorm.
She's good. I got about 3 emails a day from her. But I do think it would help you to just go through your Massachusetts National Venture Capital Association directory and reach out to some of the senior partners at the firms and tell them, can you send me some women entrepreneurs? I mean, there is a network there. It just takes a little prodding now and then. There's also a group called the Pipeline Fellowship, which is all about getting more women angel investors. Because we heard yesterday that 20 years ago, 1990, 2% of VC funds went to women. Today, almost 20 years later, it's 4%. Yeah. That growth, it's like, that's not impressive. But we know that if there are women investors, we're more likely to get women entrepreneurs who are funded. And so the Pipeline Fellowship encourages women who have a level of capital that they could be investors to train them how to become angel investors. So I think having them in the audience is going to be more likely, like I'm going to be more encouraged as a woman entrepreneur if I see potential funders that are also women. There's just one more resource. Some of the state pension funds, their investment offices do look out for what they call emerging managers, and to make sure that the people that invest the pension money look like the public and not just one segment of the public. So they could be a good resource for you.
So Nancy, I thought that your description of the attributes and the characteristics of an entrepreneur was fantastic and spot on, but those aren't necessarily attributes of a good manager of a large company. So I'm curious if you've looked at a plan for when you get to scale in your startup, and an exit strategy perhaps for you, and sort of your vision of what's next for you. It might be a little early for that now, given where you are, but I think it would be interesting to hear sort of what's your vision for what your organization looks like when it grows up, and do you see yourself still there or moving on?
So I guess I'm going to answer that in two pieces. One is that certainly in every aspect of what I've done so far with my company, I've been entirely unprepared for it. And I've worked to see if I could reach the level of, I mean, even becoming a manager of a small team, I didn't really have experience with that. And so I think it's important to be aware of how you're doing on that and where your weaknesses are. And if I'm able to continue to grow with the company, I'm very committed to doing that. And if we reach a scale where my learning is slowing the business down, then I absolutely think it makes sense to find the right people to add, and it can depend what role. I mean, you have models where you add people in at COO, where you add people in on the top and move into different roles. I think there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but certainly something I think about. In terms of what I want to do in my career, I care a lot about kind of issues of energy and also water. I'm very interested in the water space, and what I feel like I'm doing right now is building a skill set that I can apply to other businesses going forward. I know I like the early stage. We'll have to see as we grow whether that turns out to be a fit for me, and I end up growing a smaller number of companies or being part of the early A-round phase of more, that remains to be seen. But these are issues I care about, and I think there's a good opportunity to make an impact with innovation, and that's what I'm passionate about doing.
Hi, especially for Nancy. Hi, my name is Alison Sawyer. I have a later stage startup in hardware. We deal more in traditional oil and gas. We're down in Texas more than clean tech. And I've probably met with 100 investors over the past few years. And I've never had a meeting with an investor that was a woman and the decision maker in the room. There have been women in the room, don't get me wrong, but there's one real decision maker in the room. And I was just, and especially in hard tech and oil and gas, I just don't see other women CEOs around me, especially young women. And I have a personal opinion because there's not that many female investors on the VC private equity end, because we deal a lot more with private equity now. So why do you think that is, Nancy? What do you think we can do to help? Is there anything it's probably not anything I can do to help, but I was just wondering if you could talk to that, because I am mystified by it, frankly.
Well, yeah, it is a concern, and there definitely is a correlation between if you are a woman VC, you tend to fund more women entrepreneurs. In our shop, I think you're right about the 4%. I think we're like 25% or something like that. So it varies from time to time, but I don't know if it's causal, but it's certainly correlated. And so it's important to get more women decision makers, as you point out. And they are coming up the ranks. The problem is that venture capital is a learned, you kind of have to be an apprentice for a long time, and you have to lose a lot of money before you're actually good at it. And that's very daunting for anyone, but especially sometimes there's the whole tension between current income and managing your family and deferring your income to a longer term sort of profit taking model, and that isn't for everyone, and it's just a higher risk model. So I think what we need to do, the programs I mentioned that the pension funds have in this country, many of the large states have programs where they actually go out and seek women or minorities to run funds, because they see that there is this lack of diversity. So there are some programs that can encourage more capital allocation, but in terms of getting more women to like doing this, I think you need, it's going to take a while, and you just need to, every time you raise a fund, think about who you're going to hire and have it have it spread that way. I know that's not very satisfying, but.
For example, we are doing a $10 million round. My initial, this is really important to me. So initially I was like, well, I am only going to take money from a fund that's got at least one female partner. And then really quickly that became unrealistic. Then I go, well, you know, this is still a pillar of my entire life. I'm from deep South Alabama. This is so important to me to see more women in leadership positions. So I'm like, well, then I'm definitely going to go with a private equity firm that's invested in at least one female CEO. That became unrealistic. And I'm just, the answer of, oh, venture capital is just a little too high risk for women is just not a good enough answer for me. I think it is an answer, but it may be right, but that just doesn't seem enough to answer why. It probably is correct, don't get me wrong.
It
just doesn't.
The roots of venture capital are very much sort of, it was a club for many, many decades, and there are vestiges of that still in the industry. But the good news is that, you know people like Emily, people like Vanessa, I mean, there's more, there are more women coming in every day. It's just that to get to the point where you're the general, the senior partner, that, that takes 10, 15 years, and you just, you can't accelerate it too much, or else you're going to get people that haven't gone through all of the learning, and you're setting them up to have trouble. So. I'm happy to take this offline with you. I do think that there are folks out there, and unfortunately we don't invest in oil and gas. So, but I do. I mean, I just read there's a woman at Goldman Sachs private equity that does oil and gas investments. That they just did some big deal in Texas, and she's on a panel with me in New York in November. So, I'm happy to connect you with a few people, a few women that may get you started. All right, we've covered a lot of topics. I guess we don't. Do we have time for one more question or not? I can't.
No.
No. Okay.
They're saying no.
All right. So what I was going to have a different question in terms of what we ask at the end and our online participants. But given the discussion we just had, let's get everyone's best ideas on how to bring more women into the clean energy industry, from finance to companies to policy. Let's hear from people about that. And while you're thinking about that, let's give a big round of applause for Vanessa, Emily, and Charlotte.